I was able to play those who came both before the release and after the release, and here's my thoughts so far. In the game, you have to fight planetary pollution. You have to heal the planet of Solarus for the sake of your species. It's an open world third person co-op game with puzzle and survival elements. Some of these elements are really fun, especially the co-op part, because I think there's nothing more fun than just fuck around with friends in a game. The puzzle solving is done through exploration and through the use of energies, which are this key mechanic in the game. There's 4 of them and they do different things. One of them lets you run really fast and run through certain objects and walls. Another one lets you fly around kind of like a jetpack. Overall, it's an interesting concept, but it's a little held back by its own ambition, in my opinion. The open world element feels more like a detriment than an advantage, honestly. The world is huge, so it takes forever to go through, especially if you have to go back and forth. It just feels more like a chore than anything else. It's also pretty empty and confusing. There's not a lot of clear landmarks that let you know where you are or where you're going. So it's pretty easy to get lost or to struggle to find the place to go somewhere. Plus, most of the time you can't look around to get your bearings straight because you're getting harassed by enemies, which I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The realistic design they went for, I think, is a bit of a problem too. With all these complex shapes, the collision and hitboxes are not very consistent. If they really wanted to make an open world 3D game with powers and platformings and gravity altering elements, they could have gone for a design more like Breath of the Wild or even Mario Odyssey, which, more cartoonish so you can do very flat surfaces without it looking wonky. Because with all the complex shapes of objects and buildings and rock formations, you often get really wonky collisions and hitboxes, so it definitely isn't great for this sort of game. Plus, because it's open world and it's 3D, I think it's a lot harder to make a very vibrant, memorable art style, and so that also hurts how intuitive it is to get around the place. So for an example of why I'm kind of criticizing the world, at one point we had to talk to this NPC at the top of a mountain. Me and my friend just couldn't find a way to get to that NPC. So because my friend was using the jetpack energy, he ended up just flying up there by himself. I just waited for him at the bottom of the mountain. And then once he got there, it was so difficult to get up there, it wasn't worth him coming back down to do the gathering quest and then have to go back up to give it to the NPC. So I ended up doing the quest alone while he waited at the top of the mountain. I've mentioned the enemies, and this is wild. I mean, in the pre-release version, they didn't have these, and honestly, it didn't feel like they were lacking them. But now you have a bunch of them. They're honestly all over the place. And there's a lot of problems with them in terms of coding and bugs. For example, you have this contaminated ground, which is meant to hurt you when you walk over it, but it seems to not have an upper bound. I'm guessing that's so that you can't just jump and jump and jump and avoid taking any damage. But for example, in this clip, you can see that I'm in a platform 20 meters away from the ground and I'm still taking damage. Feels like no matter how high you go, you're still taking damage if there's contaminated ground a kilometer below you. And then there's these plants that just try to slap you, and they slap so fast and so hard that you just die if you don't have the energy that lets you run fast. If they had a reasonable delay like Alawi's tentacles in League of Legends, for example, then you would be able to dodge them and it would be understandable, but they just hit way too fast, and from certain angles you can dodge them pretty easily, and from other angles it's really, really difficult to dodge them consistently. On the other end of the spectrum, you have some enemies that are so easy to dodge that they don't even matter. And then there's these rats that will literally follow you to the end of the world. They never leave you alone. There's nothing you can do to stop them. You can't fight them back. They will just keep going forever. We were playing co-op, and for some reason they would all target the same guy. It would change around once we reloaded the level and stuff, but one guy would be completely free to do whatever he wanted, and one guy will be running around the entire continent with 5 rats all running at him. It was hilarious. Not really intended, I'm guessing, but hilarious nonetheless. Another thing is, it was kind of disappointing how rarely we actually got to use the energies. Like with the energy I was using, I rarely got to run through anything. There was these doors I could run through, but you could also just open them with a very simple minigame, so there's no point. Obviously, I got to run faster, so I was spamming it, but some of the other energies are just completely useless for like 95% of the time. And that really is a shame because I'd say energies are like the most distinguishing feature of this game, so they should be very present. But again, I think this is because of the open world. If the game was a lot smaller, it would be a lot easier to put a lot of stuff for you to interact with through the energies. Maybe you could have like the same level, but one path is like blocked by a boulder that you need the fire energy to go through. One path is blocked by a wall that you can run through with the whatever green energy. Another one has a gap that's way too fat, like it's way too big to cross unless you have the jetpack energy. Another one, honestly, I can't even remember what the other energy did, but you get the point. And a final thing is that I have a GTX 970, which was pretty top of the line when I bought it back in 2016, but nowadays not so much. And I just couldn't run the game. And that was very weird to me because the game doesn't feel like it has this insane graphics that should be stopping me from playing it. It's an indie game, right? And I've been playing like Cyberpunk 2077 with like medium settings and like close to 60 FPS. So that ended up being pretty frustrating to me. And honestly, with the frame rate and the motion blur, I ended up even getting headaches from playing the game, which is why I'm basing this review on 10 hours of gameplay rather than the completed game. In fact, I couldn't record and play at the same time, so all the clips you can see in the background were recorded by my friend who does have a modern, top-of-the-line gaming computer. So yeah, that's what I thought of the game. I've left a link to the Steam page if you want to try it out for yourself. Make sure to let me know what you thought of the game if you have played it. And if you do try it out, make sure to come back and tell me because I'm always curious what the community thinks of these smaller projects, I guess. So that's it. Bye.